She hurled the crystal glass across the boardroom, and it shattered against the wall 2 inches from her father's head. The entire room froze. 40 executives. Dead silence. And Charlotte Sterling, CEO, wheelchair designer suit, looked her billionaire father straight in the eyes and said, "I will never marry that man." What happened next destroyed everything she had built. Her father didn't fire her. He did something worse. He sent her away to a dirt road farm in Montana to live with a stranger and his little boy. What he called punishment became the one thing she never knew she needed. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The morning Victor Sterling made his decision, he didn't raise his voice. He never did. That was what made him dangerous. He sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the Sterling Group's 42nd floor conference room, his silver cufflinks catching the light, his face completely still. Around him sat 12 of the most powerful deal makers on the East Coast. Lawyers, investment directors, 2 men who had the private numbers of sitting senators, and at the other end of the table sat his daughter, Cassandra Sterling, 34 years old, CEO of Sterling Digital, the fastest growing technology firm in the country, and the only person in the room who had never once been afraid of him. She sat in her wheelchair with her spine straight and her hands folded, and she looked at her father the way a person looks at a storm they've already decided to walk through. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. Her voice was even, controlled. "You want me to marry Daniel Ashford, a man I have met exactly twice, in order to secure a real estate merger that your division mismanaged." Victor didn't blink. "I want you to be useful to this family." "I am useful to this family. I turned a failing tech subsidiary into a $2 billion company in 4 years. That's what useful looks like." "This is different." "Different how?" Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the men around the table, as if deciding whether to speak freely in front of them. He decided. "The Ashford Group is not interested in a contract," he said quietly. "They're interested in a union, and I gave Gerald Ashford my word. You gave him your word about me." "Yes." Cassandra felt something very cold settle in her chest. She had grown up understanding, not resenting, just understanding that her father ran his world the way he ran his business. Strategically, efficiently, with minimal sentiment. She had learned to work within that structure to carve out her own power inside it. She had told herself for years that she could navigate him. But this was different. This was her life, her body, being offered across a table like a contract clause. "No," she said. The room tensed. "Cassandra, no, Dad." She pushed back from the table, slightly squaring herself to him fully. "Not this. Not ever this. You can renegotiate the deal. Offer them equity. Offer them a board seat. Offer them whatever you want. But I am not a bargaining chip." Victor's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional." "I'm being a person. This family. I'm done." She reached for the handles of her wheelchair. "Schedule the Ashford people for next week. I'll find you a real solution, but I won't be in this room for the rest of this conversation." She wheeled herself toward the door. Behind her, Victor said very quietly, so only she could hear it clearly, "You've always thought your condition made you special, made you untouchable. It doesn't." She stopped. Didn't turn around. Her hands gripped the wheels. "What did you just say?" "I said you are not as strong as you believe you are." His voice was almost gentle, almost fatherly. "And one day, that stubbornness of yours is going to cost you everything." Cassandra sat there for 3 full seconds. Then she pushed through the door. That night, she sat alone in her penthouse apartment on the Upper West Side, the city glittering 40 floors below her. And she tried to figure out how to feel. She was angry. She knew that. She was also tired in a way that went deeper than exhaustion. A tiredness that had been building for years quietly underneath the press appearances and the product launches, and the quarterly reviews, and the physical therapy appointments she never talked about in interviews. She poured herself 2 fingers of scotch and parked near the window and just sat there in the dark for a while watching the lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. The board has requested a statement by Thursday regarding the Ashford partnership. Then, 3 minutes later, a text from a number she didn't recognize. This is your father's assistant. He asked me to send you the attached documents. Please review tonight. She didn't open them. She fell asleep in her chair at the window, something she would have been ashamed of a few years ago and had since made peace with. Victor moved faster than she expected. She had assumed he would circle, apply pressure gradually the way he always did, wearing a person down over weeks until they came around. It was his preferred method. Efficient. Low drama. Instead, he called her to his home office 4 days after the boardroom confrontation and handed her an envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "An arrangement," he said. He was at his desk reading, glasses on, as if this were a routine meeting. "You'll spend 3 months in Montana. A family there has agreed to host you. The time away will give the Ashford situation room to breathe. When you return, we'll revisit the conversation." Cassandra stared at him. "Montana? A farm, outside Bozeman. You're sending me to a farm. I'm giving you time to think clearly. You're punishing me." She said it flatly, not as an accusation, just as a statement of fact. "Like I'm 17 and missed curfew. You're punishing me." Victor took off his glasses. For a moment, just a moment, something moved across his face that might have been discomfort. "This family has weathered a great deal," he said. "I need you present and cooperative, not performing some personal rebellion." "Personal rebellion?" She almost laughed. "I told you I wouldn't get married. That's not rebellion. That's just—" "Cassandra." His voice dropped to that particular register she'd known her whole life, the one that meant the conversation is over. "The arrangements have been made. The family has been compensated. You will go." She looked at him for a long time. "And if I don't?" He held her gaze. "Then I will revisit your position at Sterling Digital. Formally." There it was. She'd always known somewhere in the back of her mind that this card existed. She just hadn't thought he would play it. Not really. She was his daughter. But the man across the desk wasn't looking at her like a father right now. He was looking at her like a problem that needed to be resolved. She told no one except her closest friend, a woman named Priya, who had worked beside her since the early startup days. They sat in Cassandra's kitchen 2 nights before the departure, and Priya didn't say what Cassandra expected her to say. She didn't say, "Fight him," or "Get a lawyer," or "This is unbelievable." She said, "What do you actually want?" Cassandra looked at her. "What? Not what you want to tell your father. Not what you want to tell the board. What do you actually want right now?" Cassandra opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't know," she finally said, and it scared her how true that was. Priya nodded slowly. "Then maybe go. Just go. Not because he's right. Not because you're giving in. But because you've been running at full speed for 4 years and you look like a woman who forgot that she's allowed to stop. It's a farm, Priya. I know. I don't know anything about farms. I know. I'll go insane. Probably." Priya smiled. "Or you'll figure something out. That's what you do." The drive from the Bozeman airport took 40 minutes on roads that grew progressively less like roads. The car her father had arranged, a black SUV with a driver who spoke approximately 12 words the entire trip, eventually turned onto a gravel lane, bordered by open fields and a tree line in the far distance. Cassandra sat in the back seat with her laptop open and her jaw set, and her eyes tracking the landscape with something she refused to call anxiety. She had read what she could about the place. The farm had been in operation for about 6 years. The man who ran it, a former Marine she gathered, though the details were thin, had taken it over after some kind of personal loss. He had a young son. He sold produce to restaurants and local markets. That was essentially everything she had. Victor had apparently paid this man a significant sum to take her in for 3 months. That part bothered her more than anything else, the transactional nature of it. She was once again an item being arranged. The SUV crunched to a stop in front of a weathered farmhouse with a wide porch and a screen door that needed replacing. A man came down the porch steps. He was maybe 36, 37, broad shoulders, a dark canvas jacket worn at the elbows, the kind of hands that come from actual work. He moved without hurry, which annoyed her for a reason she couldn't immediately explain. He opened the car door. "Ms. Sterling," he said. "Cassandra is fine." She was already reaching for her folded wheelchair in the back. "And before you ask, I've got this. Don't grab it." He stepped back. She extracted the chair, unfolded it, positioned it, transferred herself with the practiced efficiency of someone who had long since stopped finding this process dramatic. Then she looked up at him. "You're the one my father paid." "I am," he said simply. There was no embarrassment in it, no defensiveness. "I'm Cole Whitaker." "My father sent me here as punishment," she said. She said it directly, watching his face for a reaction, pity, discomfort, anything she could use as a wall. Cole Whitaker looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Then he sent you to the wrong place. Nobody gets punished here." She didn't know what to do with that. She had prepared for condescension, for overhelpfulness, for the particular performance that people always put on when they first encountered her wheelchair, the careful brightness, the slightly elevated voices, as though the chair affected her hearing. She had not prepared for someone who looked at her like she was simply a person who had just arrived. "The path to the house is gravel," she said, because she needed to say something. "It is," he agreed. "It's manageable, but I'll be honest, some of it's rough. I've got wooden boards down in a couple places. We can add more wherever you need. I'll tell you if I need something." "That works for me." He picked up the bag the driver had set down and walked back toward the house without making a production of anything. Cassandra sat there for a moment, alone in the gravel, the Montana air cold and clean against her face. The driver's SUV was already turning around. Above the tree line, the sky was the kind of wide and absolute that she had forgotten existed outside of photographs. She heard a screen door bang open, and a small voice called out, "Is that her? Is she here?" Then, a 7-year-old boy appeared at the top of the porch steps, all dark hair and grass-stained knees, and looked down at her with frank, uncomplicated curiosity. "Are you the lady from New York?" he asked. "I am," she said. "Dad said you're really smart." She blinked. "Did he?" "Yeah." The boy came down the steps. "I'm Noah. I like dinosaurs and soccer. Do you like dinosaurs?" "I never really thought about it." "That's okay," Noah said seriously. "You can learn." And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Cassandra Sterling almost smiled. Todd. She didn't sleep well the first night. The silence was too complete. No traffic, no elevator hum, no building sounds, just wind and the occasional creak of the old farmhouse settling into itself. She lay in the small bedroom they had given her, a room with a door wide enough for her chair, she noticed, and a bathroom that had clearly been modified recently, the grab bars new and clean, and she stared at the ceiling and went over her options the way she always did when she couldn't sleep. Like a list. Like a problem to be solved. She could call her lawyer in the morning, discuss what leverage she actually had. She could call the board directly. She had relationships there, years of them. There were members who were loyal to the company over the family. She could return to New York. Victor could threaten her position, but removing a sitting CEO wasn't as simple as the threat made it sound. She stopped. Through the window she could see a faint strip of stars between the curtain and the frame. Real stars. More than she had seen since she was a kid on a family vacation that she barely remembered. "What do you actually want?" Priya's voice quiet in her mind. Cassandra didn't answer it. Not tonight. She closed her eyes. Outside, somewhere on the farm, a light was still on in the old equipment barn. Cole Whitaker was still awake too. Neither of them knew yet what the next 3 months were going to take from them and what they were going to give back. But it had started. quietly in the dark like most important things do. The first full day on the farm started before Cassandra was ready for it. She heard movement at 5:30 in the morning. Boots on wooden floors, the low sound of a radio somewhere in the kitchen, the screen door opening and closing. She lay still for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of a household that didn't wait for anyone and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Irrelevant. She pushed herself up, transferred to her chair, and wheeled to the window. Cole was already crossing the yard toward the greenhouse, a thermos in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Noah was a few steps behind him, talking at a pace that suggested the boy had never once in his life run out of things to say. She watched them for a moment. Then she went to get dressed. By the time she made it to the kitchen, there was coffee made, and a note on the counter in handwriting that was unexpectedly neat for a man who worked with his hands. Eggs in the pan if you want them. Greenhouse tour at 8 if you're interested. No pressure either way. She poured the coffee. She ate the eggs. She went to the greenhouse at 8. Cole was bent over a row of seedling trays when she rolled in, and he looked up without the particular expression she had braced for the one that said, "Oh, good you came. I was worried about you." He just nodded and said, "Morning. Watch the lip on that threshold. It's about a half-inch higher than it should be." She navigated it without difficulty and came to a stop beside him. "What are you planting?" "Tomatoes. Second rotation of the season. These'll go out in about 3 weeks if the weather cooperates." He straightened. "I've got 6 greenhouse rows, 4 outdoor fields, a root cellar, and a cold storage unit that's been giving me trouble since February. What do you know about commercial refrigeration systems?" She stared at him. "Nothing." "What about supply chain logistics?" "Considerably more." "Good." He handed her the clipboard. "Because I've got a distribution agreement with 3 restaurants in Bozeman and 1 in Missoula that I'm about to lose if I can't get my delivery timing under control. The owner of the Missoula place sent me this last week." She took the clipboard and read. The email was polite, but firm. "Late deliveries 3 times in 6 weeks. 1 spoiled shipment of herbs." The owner liked Cole's product, but couldn't keep absorbing the inconsistency. "What's causing the delays?" she asked. "Driver scheduling. I'm using a courier service that also handles 3 other farms in the county. They bump me when the volume gets heavy because I'm the smallest account." "So you need your own delivery structure, or you need to become their largest account." "I need whichever one costs less." Cassandra looked at the clipboard again. She looked at the rows of seedlings. She looked at Cole. "Do you have a laptop?" "Old one. Works fine. Pull up your distribution contracts. All of them. And your cost records for the last 12 months. He looked at her for a beat. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't." She set the clipboard on the edge of the seedling table and wheeled back toward the door. "I'll be at the kitchen table. Bring me the laptop and the files." She heard him exhale behind her. Not with irritation, with something closer to amusement. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She worked for 4 hours straight. She hadn't expected to. She had sat down with the intention of identifying the obvious problem and flagging it something that would take an hour at most. And instead, she found herself 2 layers deep in the farm's entire operational structure, which was functional in the way that a car with a cracked windshield and bald tires is technically functional, meaning it worked until it didn't. Cole's record-keeping was meticulous. That surprised her. Every delivery, every sale, every cost logged in a spreadsheet that was unglamorous but accurate. It told the story clearly. The farm was profitable, but fragile. 1 bad season, 1 equipment failure, 1 lost restaurant contract, and the margins would collapse. She started building a new model. Noah wandered in around noon and climbed onto the chair across from her without being invited. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Working. On what?" "Your dad's delivery problem." Noah considered this. "He talks about that a lot. The delivery guys. He says a word sometimes that I'm not supposed to repeat." "That sounds about right." She kept her eyes on the screen. "Do you eat lunch?" "Yeah. Dad usually makes sandwiches. Go tell your dad I'd like to eat at the table. I want to show him something. Noah slid off the chair and ran toward the back door with the specific energy of a child who has been given a mission. Cassandra watched him go and felt something loosen slightly in her chest. She didn't examine it. Till over sandwiches. Good ones. She had to admit thick bread and something that tasted like it had come from an actual garden, rather than a plastic container. She laid out what she had found. You're underselling to the restaurants, she said. Your per unit cost has gone up 12% in the last 18 months, but you haven't adjusted your pricing. You're absorbing that loss. If I raise prices, I lose clients. If you raise prices and improve reliability, you gain clients. Premium produce is a seller's market right now, especially for the kind of restaurants you're targeting. They're not choosing you because you're cheap. They're choosing you because your product is better than what they get from commercial suppliers. She turned the laptop toward him. You're leaving roughly $40,000 a year on the table. Possibly more. Cole looked at the screen, then at her. You got all of that from a morning with my files. I got all of that from a morning with your files. He was quiet for a moment. Noah was eating his sandwich and looking back and forth between them like he was watching a tennis match. What would you do? Cole asked. If it were your operation, I'd renegotiate every contract. I'd raise prices by 8% and offer the restaurants a guaranteed delivery window with a penalty clause if I miss it, which incentivizes me to fix the courier problem permanently. Then I'd approach 2 or 3 additional restaurants in the region and use your current clients as references. Within a year, you'd have enough volume to justify a dedicated delivery vehicle and a part-time driver. A dedicated vehicle is a significant capital investment. I know. That's why the sequence matters. You build the contracts first, then the volume justifies the asset. She pulled the laptop back. But that's just what I do. It's your farm. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Not with the expression she was used to, the one that said impressive for a woman in your position, but with something more direct than that. Like he was simply taking her seriously. Can you help me draft the renegotiation letters? He asked. I can write them entirely if you want, or I can show you how and you can do it yourself. Show me, he said. I want to understand it, not just have it done for me. That surprised her. In her experience, people usually wanted the outcome without the process. They wanted the answer handed to them. All right, she said. Clear the table. They worked together through the afternoon, and it was strange in a way she hadn't anticipated, not uncomfortable, but unfamiliar. She was accustomed to working with people who deferred to her, who waited for direction, who filtered their responses through the awareness that she was their employer. Cole had none of that. He pushed back when he disagreed. He asked questions that were sharp and practical. When she explained something, he didn't nod along politely. He actually engaged with it, sometimes taking the idea further than she had, and sometimes correctly identifying where her assumptions didn't account for the realities of farming logistics. She liked it. She hadn't liked working with someone like this in a long time. At 4 o'clock, Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway, with mud on his boots and a look of intense urgency. Dad, he said, the east fence. Cole was already pushing back from the table. How bad? Tommy Greer's cows are on our side again. Cole grabbed his jacket. He looked at Cassandra with a brief, almost apologetic expression. Go, she said. We can pick this up tonight if you're... Go deal with your fence. I'll keep working. He went. Noah went with him at a run, his boots already thumping down the porch steps. Cassandra sat alone at the kitchen table in the afternoon quiet, her laptop open, and she realized that she hadn't thought about New York in 6 hours. That was the longest she had gone without thinking about New York in 4 years. The fence situation took 2 hours and involved 3 of Tommy Greer's cows, a repair kit, and a conversation between Cole and the elderly neighbor that Cassandra could partially hear through the open kitchen window, and that seemed to involve approximately equal parts genuine goodwill and deeply held mutual stubbornness. When Cole came back in, he washed his hands at the sink and looked at her. "You're still here. I found a pricing error from 2022 that's been compounding," she said. "Sit down. Give me 5 minutes. I'll give you 3. He sat down in 4. That evening after Noah was in bed, they sat on the porch in the cooling dark, and Cole poured 2 mugs of coffee that neither of them needed at that hour, but both of them took anyway. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Depends on what it is." "What actually happened before you came here?" She was quiet for a moment. The question didn't feel invasive the way it might have from someone else. It felt like a person genuinely wanting to know. "My father made a business decision," she said. "He wanted me to marry someone in order to close a deal. I said no. He sent me here." "So he punished you?" "He called it giving me time to think." "What do you call it?" She looked out at the dark fields. "Punishment," she said. "But I said that yesterday, didn't I?" "You did. I've been thinking about it since." And, Cole turned his mug in his hands. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. Noah was 3. After she passed, I had about 6 weeks where I thought seriously about selling this place, moving somewhere else, starting completely over. And I had people in my life telling me what I should do. Her family, my family. People who thought they knew what was best for me and Noah." Cassandra looked at him. "What did you do?" she asked. "I stayed," he said. "Not because I was told to. Because one morning I walked out to that greenhouse at 5 in the morning and I planted seeds. And it was the first time since she died that I felt like the future was real." He paused. "I'm not saying this place is going to fix whatever you're dealing with. I'm not saying that. But I think sometimes people get sent somewhere, or end up somewhere, and they decide in the first 5 minutes that they already know everything about it." Cassandra was quiet. "You think I've decided that," she said. "I think you came here ready to survive it, which is different from being willing to actually be here." She didn't answer right away. The night was very still around them, and she was aware of how exposed that felt, sitting on a dark porch with a man she'd known for 2 days who had just said something true about her, without any apparent interest in using it against her. "I built a company," she said finally. "From 23 employees to 400. I did that from a wheelchair while managing a progressive pain condition that most people in my industry don't know about. I did it with a father who told me when I first showed him my business plan that I was overestimating my capacity." She said the last phrase in a voice that was a perfect flat imitation of Victor Sterling's boardroom tone. "So yes, I came here ready to survive it. That's what I do." Cole didn't say she should be proud of herself. He didn't tell her she was amazing or inspiring. He just looked at her steadily and said, "That sounds exhausting." And the simplicity of it, the completeness of it, hit her somewhere she had not expected to be hit. "It is," she said. And for the first time in longer than she could calculate, she said it without armor around it. They sat for a while after that without talking, which she discovered to her surprise was not uncomfortable at all. The days developed their own shape. Mornings she worked on the farm's operational structure building systems she found herself genuinely absorbed by. Not because they were intellectually complex, they weren't, not by the standards of Sterling Digital, but because they were real in a way that corporate strategy often wasn't. Every decision she made had an immediate visible consequence. Fix the delivery contract and Cole could actually plan his harvest. Adjust the pricing model, and Noah could actually have a more stable year at school. There was no abstraction layer, no quarterly report to smooth over the rough edges, just the direct line between the work and the result. Afternoons, she often ended up in the greenhouse. Not working exactly, Cole had made her a position at one of the raised workstations where she could manage seedling trays without the angle becoming a problem, but learning. She had not expected to find it interesting. She had expected to find it tolerable. Instead, she found herself asking questions she hadn't meant to ask and caring about the answers in a way she hadn't meant to care. "Why do you rotate the tomatoes out of this row?" she asked one afternoon. "Soil health," Cole said. "Same crop in the same soil pulls the same nutrients year after year. Eventually, it gets depleted. She thought about that for longer than the question probably warranted. Evenings, Noah. The boy had decided with the absolute certainty that only 7-year-olds can muster that Cassandra was his person. He did homework at the kitchen table while she worked and provided a running commentary on everything from the injustices of his second-grade classroom to the taxonomic classifications of various prehistoric reptiles. She had discovered that if she asked him one genuine question per session, it bought her approximately 45 minutes of peaceful coexistence before he required her full attention again. "Noah," she said one evening while he was arranging dinosaur figures on the edge of the table in what he described as a very important order. "Yeah. What do you remember about your mom?" He was quiet for a moment. His hands kept moving, placing a small triceratops carefully beside a brachiosaurus. "She smelled like lavender," he said, "and she sang really off-key in the car. Dad always laughed." He paused. "And she used to say that crying isn't weak. It's just your feelings being too big to hold in." Cassandra looked at him. "She sounds like she was smart," she said. Noah nodded seriously. "Dad says she was the smartest person he ever knew, before you came." He looked up. Now he says it's a tie. Cassandra felt something move through her chest that she didn't have a name for immediately. She looked back at her laptop. "Finish your homework," she said, and her voice was only slightly less steady than usual. 3 weeks in, she received a call from Priya. "How's Montana?" Priya asked. "Functional," Cassandra said. She was parked by the window in her room, the late evening light coming in flat and gold across the floor. "That's the least enthusiastic endorsement of anything I've ever heard from you." "The work is good. The air is different. Noah is—" She stopped. "Noah is what?" "He's 7 years old, and he already knows more about who he is than I do," Cassandra said. It came out more honest than she'd intended. A beat of silence from Priya's end. "And the father?" Priya asked carefully. Cassandra was quiet for a moment. "Complicated," she said. "Complicated how?" "The kind of complicated that I don't have language for yet." Priya didn't push. She knew better. But Cassandra could hear the particular quality of her silence, the one that meant she was paying very close attention. "Be careful," Priya said softly. "Not in the way your father means. Just be careful with yourself. Okay? You're not as hard as you think you are." Cassandra looked out the window. Cole was crossing the yard below Noah on his shoulders, both of them laughing at something she couldn't hear. "I know," she said. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a weakness. The letter from Sterling Group's legal team arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her bedroom door in an envelope that Cole had clearly accepted from a courier without asking questions. Cassandra stared at it for a long moment before she opened it. It was 2 pages. Clean, formal language. The kind of letter that cost $800 an hour to produce and was designed to feel inevitable. The summary was this: her position as CEO of Sterling Digital was under formal review. The board had been notified. A vote on restructuring of executive leadership would be scheduled within 60 days unless she returned to New York and agreed to participate in the Ashford Partnership negotiations in good faith. In good faith. Her father's lawyers had written in good faith about an arranged marriage. She folded the letter, put it on the nightstand, sat with her hands in her lap for a few minutes, and breathed the way her physical therapist had taught her years ago, slowly from the diaphragm, the kind of breathing that didn't fix anything, but kept the panic from running the room. Then she picked up her phone and called her personal attorney, a sharp, unsentimental woman named Deborah, who had been her counsel since the early days of the company. "I've seen it," Deborah said before Cassandra could speak. "Your father's team sent a courtesy copy." "Courtesy," Cassandra said flatly. "His word, not mine. Here's where you stand. He has grounds to call the review he controls enough of the founding shares that the board has to hear him. But removing a sitting CEO, who hasn't violated her contract, requires a supermajority vote. And I've spoken informally with 3 board members this morning who are not inclined to support the motion." "Which 3? Deborah named them. Cassandra processed this. Two of them she had cultivated carefully over 4 years. The third surprised her. Harrison voted against my father's last 3 proposals, Deborah continued. He's not doing this for you personally. He doesn't like being maneuvered. That works in your favor. What do I need to do? Right now, nothing. Let me work. The 60-day window is actually useful. It means your father has to hold the threat out there without being able to act on it. Every day that passes without you capitulating makes him look less in control, not more. A pause. Cassandra, are you all right? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I sound exactly as fine as I am. Keep me updated. She hung up, looked at the wall. Then she unlocked her chair, went to the kitchen, and made herself a cup of coffee with the focused precision of someone who needed something to do with their hands. Cole came in 20 minutes later from the morning work, pulling off his jacket, and stopped when he saw her face. Bad news, he asked. My father is attempting to remove me from my own company. Cole was quiet for a beat. Then he said, Coffee hot? Yes. He poured himself a mug and sat down across from her, and he didn't ask what she was going to do or offer an opinion about Victor Sterling or say any of the things people usually said when they were performing concern. He just sat there, which was more useful than all of it. After a minute she said, He thinks if he takes the company, I have no choice but to come back. Does he know you well enough to know if that's true? She turned her mug in her hands. He thinks he does. He's known me my whole life. He watched me build that company from a spare bedroom. He used to brag about me at dinner parties. She stopped. And then somewhere along the line, I became a liability to him instead of an asset, and he just recalculated, like adjusting a budget line. What changed? She didn't answer immediately. I stopped being manageable, she said. I got too big. The company got too big. And my disability, which was always something he preferred not to discuss publicly, became something I started talking about openly. In interviews, at conferences. I became a story he didn't control. She looked at Cole. That's what this is really about, not the Ashford deal. The Ashford deal is the mechanism. What he actually wants is to remind me that I exist inside his structure. Cole looked at her steadily. And do you... She met his eyes. Not anymore, she said, and she was surprised, as she said it, to find that she meant it completely. She threw herself into the farm work with an intensity that surprised even her. She finished renegotiating Cole's restaurant contracts, drafted every letter herself, and managed the responses when 2 of the clients pushed back on the price increases. She held her ground on both. One of them, a high-end restaurant in Missoula, came back with a counteroffer that she declined twice before they accepted her original terms. Cole had watched that particular email exchange over her shoulder and said nothing until she closed the laptop. You enjoy that, he said. I enjoy solving things, she said. No, I mean the back and forth. Most people find negotiation uncomfortable. Most people haven't had my father as a sparring partner for 34 years. She glanced up at him. Discomfort is just friction. Friction means you're getting somewhere. He smiled at that, a real smile, the kind that moved all the way to his eyes. And she looked away before she could think too much about it. She built a new website for the farm. She created a mailing list and designed a simple seasonal newsletter that went to 72 subscribers in the first week and 140 by the end of the second. She drafted a proposal for a small CSA program, community-supported agriculture weekly boxes, delivered to households within 30 miles that she presented to Cole one evening with a full projection model. He read through everything carefully, the way he always did, not performing engagement, but actually thinking. This would mean hiring someone, he said. Part-time to start. The math works if you get 30 households signed up. I think you can get 60. On what basis? On the basis that your product is excellent and your pricing is finally accurate, and there is a significant market of people between here and Bozeman who are currently buying inferior vegetables from a grocery chain because they don't know you exist. He looked up from the papers. You sound confident. I am confident. What if you're wrong? Then you scale it back, but I'm not wrong. He held her gaze for a moment, and something moved between them that neither of them acknowledged directly. A current of recognition, the particular awareness that comes when two people have been working closely enough together that they have started to understand how the other one thinks. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." She nodded, looked back at her laptop. Her pulse was doing something she chose to attribute to the successful conclusion of a business discussion. Noah had a school presentation that Friday on a subject of his choosing, and he chose dinosaurs, which surprised no one. He practiced in the living room the night before with Cassandra as his audience, standing in front of the fireplace, with a handwritten note card and the gravity of a person delivering a State of the Union address. The Tyrannosaurus Rex, he began, could not actually run very fast. Scientists used to think it could, but now they know it walked really fast instead, which is still scary because it was 40 feet long. "Good opening," Cassandra said. "Really. You started with something that contradicts what people think they know. That makes them want to keep listening." Noah's eyes lit up. Like a hook. Exactly like a hook. He went back to his note card with new energy, and Cassandra sat and watched him, and felt again that nameless thing in her chest that she had been feeling with increasing frequency and had been finding increasingly difficult to dismiss. After Noah was in bed, Cole came to find her. She was still at the kitchen table working, but not with the same focus she'd had earlier, thinking more than working. "He practiced 3 more times in his room after you said that about the hook," Cole said. "I could hear him through the door. He's a quick study." "He is." Cole sat down. "He talks about you, you know. To his teacher, apparently. Ms. Devlin sent me a note asking if you'd be willing to come speak to the class sometime." Cassandra blinked. I don't do elementary schools." She said Noah told the class you were a CEO who built a company and that you live on our farm and know everything about business. "I don't know everything about business." I told her that too. She still asked. Cassandra looked at him. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd ask you." He paused. "You don't have to." She was quiet for a moment. She thought about what it would look like rolling into a second-grade classroom, 20-some-odd 7-year-olds staring at her chair with their relentless, uncomplicating honesty. Noah's face when she walked in. "Tell her Thursday works," she said. Cole's expression did something quiet and warm. "I'll let her know." He got up to pour them both water, and she watched him move around the kitchen with the ease of a man completely at home in his space, and she thought not for the first time about what Priya had said. "Be careful with yourself." She was trying. She genuinely was. The Thursday classroom visit was not what she expected. She had expected to feel like a spectacle. She had expected the careful over-politeness of a teacher managing her students' stares. She had expected to perform, which was what she usually did in public settings, the polished competence that left no room for anyone to see anything else. Instead, what happened was this. She rolled into a room full of second graders who looked at her for approximately 4 seconds before a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked with complete seriousness, "Can I try your chair?" The teacher made a small sound of distress. Cassandra laughed a real laugh, unexpected enough that it startled her. "Not this one," she said. "It's custom. But if your teacher can find a standard one, sure." The girl's name was Bella. She had been using a borrowed wheelchair for 6 weeks following a leg surgery, and was, according to Noah in a whispered sidebar, the coolest kid in class now because of it. Cassandra spoke to her for 10 minutes after the formal visit, while the other kids had snack time, and Bella told her about the specific challenges of navigating her school's older bathroom facilities, and Cassandra told her about the ramps she had insisted Cole build, and Bella said, with the blunt clarity of a 7-year-old, "Yeah, people always make ramps that don't actually work right. They make them for themselves, not for us." Cassandra had heard versions of that observation from disability advocates, from architects, from policy researchers. She had never heard it stated so plainly and so correctly. "You're absolutely right," she said. "And when you're older, you should say that to people, out loud. Exactly like that." Bella considered this. "I already do," she said. Cassandra drove back to the farm. Cole had arranged a vehicle that accommodated her chair for local trips. and she sat in the driveway for a few minutes after she arrived, not ready to go in yet, turning over the day in her mind. She had spent 4 years building a technology company, partly with the goal of proving that her disability did not limit her. She had done it by being better than everyone around her, by working harder, by performing strength so consistently that people forgot or chose to forget, or were not given the space to remember that she lived every day in a body that required negotiation. And a 7-year-old in a borrowed wheelchair had just said the truest thing anyone had said to her in recent memory. They make them for themselves, not for us. She had been making herself for other people for a very long time. That evening, the phone call she had been partially dreading and partially expecting finally came. Not from Deborah, not from the board, from Victor. She answered on the third ring. "You've been busy," he said. His voice was its usual temperature, moderate, controlled, like a thermostat set to exactly the level that revealed nothing. "I'm always busy. I've seen the board communications. Deborah is thorough, I'll give her that." A pause. "This doesn't have to become a war, Cassandra. You sent lawyers, Dad. I didn't. I sent a letter. There's a difference. The letter threatened my position. The letter outlined a timeline." She breathed. "What do you want?" "I want you to come home. I want us to sit down together and find a solution to the Ashford situation that works for both of us. You're a skilled negotiator. You've proven that in the last month, apparently, from what I've heard. So apply those skills here. To your own family. To your own future." She noticed that he said your own future, but meant his own deal. She had always noticed this. For most of her life, she had let it pass. "And if I don't," she asked, "then we proceed as the lawyers have outlined." "And you lose 3 board members and a CEO removal motion fails, and you spend 6 months in a proxy fight that gets covered by every financial publication in the country." She kept her voice even. "That's what happens, Dad. Deborah has done the count." Silence. "You've changed," he said finally. Not warmly, but not dismissively either. There was something in his voice that she hadn't heard before, something that might have been, if she was reading it right, surprise. "No," she said. "I've stopped pretending to be what you needed me to be. That's different." Another silence. "The man you're staying with," Victor said. "Whitaker." She went still. "What about him? Is he a factor in this?" The question was strategic. She understood what he was doing, identifying a variable, a potential pressure point, a way to reframe the conversation on terms he controlled. She had watched him do it in boardrooms her entire life. "Cole Whitaker is a farmer," she said carefully. "He's a man I've been working with, and he has nothing to do with my decision." "Are you sure about that?" "Goodbye, Dad." She ended the call. She sat alone in her room with the phone in her lap, and she replayed the last 30 seconds of that conversation, and she was honest with herself in the way that she had been practicing lately, carefully, like a new skill. Was Cole a factor? She looked at the wall. Outside, she could hear Noah laughing at something, and Cole's voice responding low and warm. She thought about the evenings on the porch, the way he worked beside her without performing anything. The way he had said that sounds exhausting and meant it as recognition, not pity. The way he pushed back, questioned her thinking, held his ground, trusted her judgment. The way he had looked at her that first day, just a person who had arrived, nothing more and nothing less. She thought about the fact that she had not thought about her penthouse apartment in 2 weeks. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs and took a slow breath. Yes, she thought. He was a factor. She was not ready to say that to anyone yet. But she was done lying to herself. Mum. She found Cole in this greenhouse an hour later. The evening light was coming through the glass in a way that made everything look warmer than it was, and he was checking the tomato plants 3rd week. They were taller now, beginning to need staking. He looked up when she came in. "Your father called," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know? Your face." She stopped beside the raised workstation and looked at the plants. "He asked if you were a factor in my decision." Cole's hands went still on the stake he was holding. He didn't turn around. "What did you tell him?" I told him you were a farmer I'd been working with. He was quiet for a moment. Is that what I am? He asked. The question was soft, careful, not demanding anything from it. She looked at him. He had turned to face her now, and there was nothing performed about his expression, just a man asking a real question and being willing to sit with whatever came back. No, she said, that's not all you are. The greenhouse was very quiet. The evening light did what it was doing. Cole set down the stake and crossed to her and crouched down in front of her chair so that they were at the same level, and he looked at her in the direct, unhurried way that she had come to understand was simply how he moved through the world, not rushing past things, not performing patience, just actually being present in the moment he was in. I don't know what this is, he said. I'm not going to pretend I do. Neither do I. But I know that when you came here, I thought you were going to be difficult. A corner of his mouth moved. And you are difficult. Thank you. But you're also the most fully alive person I've met in a very long time. And I don't think you know that about yourself yet. She looked at him. Something moved through her chest that wasn't grief, and wasn't fear, and wasn't the controlled competence she wore like armor, and she didn't push it away this time. I'm starting to, she said. He didn't touch her. He didn't rush the moment into something it hadn't earned yet. He just nodded slowly and stood back up and handed her a steak and said, Hold this. These tomatoes need work. She took it, and they worked beside each other in the warm, fading light. And nothing needed to be decided right now. And for once in her life, Cassandra Sterling was completely all right with that. 3 days after the greenhouse Victor arrived, Cassandra didn't know he was coming until she heard the cars, 2 of them. She registered from the sound expensive and moving too fast for a gravel road. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop and a half-eaten piece of toast when Noah burst through the back door. Cassandra, he said, and something in his voice made her look up immediately. He was 7 years old, but he had the instincts of a child who had learned to read adult tension early. There are 2 big black cars coming up the road. She closed the laptop. Cole came in from the side door 30 seconds later, wiping his hands on a cloth, and he looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them needed to say it. Noah, Cole said, go to your room and work on your dinosaur book. Dad, please, bud. Noah looked at Cassandra. She nodded. He went. She wheeled to the window and watched the 2 black SUVs park in front of the house. The first door that opened was Victor's. He looked exactly as he always looked. Suit silver hair, the posture of a man who had never once in his adult life been uncertain about whether he belonged in a room. He straightened his jacket and looked at the farmhouse with an expression she recognized. Assessment. The way he looked at properties before deciding whether they were worth acquiring. The second car door opened. The man who stepped out was Daniel Ashford. She felt something cold and absolute move through her. Ashford was 42, fit in the careful way that came from a personal trainer, and nothing more demanding than that. And he smiled when he saw the farmhouse with the particular smile of a man performing graciousness toward something he privately considered beneath him. He was wearing clothes that were deliberately casual, and expensive flannel shirt boots that had never seen actual work, and the performance of it made her jaw tighten. Cole moved to stand beside her at the window. Not in front of her, beside her. Is that him? He asked. That's him. And your father? Yes. A beat. You want me to let them in or should we make them knock? Cole asked, and his voice was so perfectly level that she felt something steady move through her chest alongside the cold. Let them in, she said. I want to be the one sitting at the table when they walk through the door. She was. Victor walked into the kitchen and looked at her and then looked at Cole and then around the room, and she watched him absorb it all, the laptop, the farm files, the coffee mugs, the evidence of a life being lived, and she watched his face process what he saw in the way it always did, categorizing, evaluating, looking for leverage. Cassandra, he said. Dad? She kept her hands flat on the table. You didn't call. I thought a conversation in person was more appropriate. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat without being invited. Ashford came in behind him and took the chair at the end and smiled at her in a way that she immediately and completely ignored. Cole stood at the counter with his arms crossed and his expression neutral. Victor glanced at him. "Could we have some privacy?" "This is Cole's home," Cassandra said. "He stays." Victor's jaw tightened slightly. He let it go. "I want to end this," Victor said. He leaned forward slightly the way he did when he was shifting into what he called his reasonable voice. She'd known that voice for 34 years. It meant he was about to say something that sounded like an offer and functioned like a demand. The board review can be dropped. The legal proceedings can be suspended. The Ashford partnership can be restructured so that your role is purely advisory. No personal commitment required beyond your professional endorsement. Cassandra looked at him. And you come home. You resume your position. You put this..." He paused, glanced around the kitchen in a way that managed to communicate volumes without using a single word. "This episode behind you." "My professional endorsement of what exactly?" Victor looked at Ashford. Ashford leaned forward. "We'd restructure the merger as a joint venture," Ashford said. His voice was smoother than she expected. He had done this before the reasonable approach after the power play. "Your company and mine working in a collaborative capacity. You'd retain full operational authority over Sterling Digital. The partnership would be professional, nothing more." She looked at him. "You flew to Montana for a joint venture offer. I flew to Montana because I believed it was worth the effort to speak with you directly." "How flattering." She turned back to her father. "And the marriage?" Victor waved a hand. "Off the table. The arrangement has been modified." She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had built an empire with intelligence and absolute relentlessness, and had taught her without meaning to almost everything she knew about how power moved in a room. At the man who had called her condition a liability, who had sent her here to be corrected. "Tell me something," she said. "What changed?" 3 weeks ago, your lawyers were threatening my position. Now you're offering to drop it. What changed?" Victor held her gaze. "The board count changed." "So Deborah was right." "Deborah is very good at her job." "She is." Cassandra nodded slowly. "So you didn't come here because you changed your mind. You came here because the threat stopped working." "I came here because you are my daughter, and I would like to resolve this by offering me a lesser version of what you originally demanded. By finding a compromise." She looked at him for another long moment. Then she looked at Ashford, who was watching her with the careful attentiveness of a man who had decided the best move was to stay very still. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "I'm going to be direct with you because I think you're probably a reasonable person operating inside an unreasonable arrangement, and I'd rather not waste your time." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm not going to endorse your company. Not because your business is necessarily bad. I haven't looked at it closely enough to have an opinion, but because my endorsement would be purchased rather than earned, and I don't sell things I haven't genuinely evaluated. That's not how I've built what I've built, and it's not how I intend to continue." Ashford opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," she said, and she said it pleasantly. "If you want a genuine professional relationship with Sterling Digital, have your team contact Deborah. We can evaluate the joint venture on its actual merits. If the numbers make sense, we'll talk. If they don't, we won't. That's the only offer I'm making." She looked back at her father. "That's it. That's all there is." The kitchen was completely quiet. Cole hadn't moved from the counter. She could feel him behind her in the room, the way you feel something solid, not intrusively, just reliably there. Victor looked at his daughter. Something moved across his face, something she might almost have called respect if she hadn't been watching too carefully to be fooled by the almost. "You've thought about this," he said. "I've had time to think. You gave me that." He sat back. He looked at his hands on the table, and for just a moment he looked like something other than Victor Sterling, something older and less certain, and she felt a brief, complicated grief move through her because he was still her father, and she still wished somewhere that he were different than he was. Then Ashford made his mistake. He leaned back in his chair and looked at her. A particular look, the kind that starts at the wheelchair and ends at the face and doesn't bother to hide what happened in between, and he said, "Look, I'm trying to be understanding here. Given your situation, I think it's generous that we're offering you any kind of continued role at all." The room changed. She felt it. Cole felt it. Even Victor seemed to feel it because he went very still. Ashford wasn't done. "A woman in your condition should be realistic about what partnerships are available to her. That's not cruel. That's just—" "Stop!" Cole's voice cut across the room from the counter. Not loud, but absolute in a way that stopped Ashford mid-sentence like a wall had appeared. Ashford looked at him. Cole uncrossed his arms and walked to the table and put both hands on the edge and leaned down to Ashford's eye level and said very quietly, "Get out of my house." "Excuse me. I said get out of my house." He held Ashford's gaze without blinking. "You came here as a guest. You spoke to a person I respect in a way I won't allow in my home. So I'm asking you once politely to leave." Ashford looked at Victor. Victor looked at Cole with an expression that had shifted into something more complicated than he usually permitted himself. Ashford stood. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Cassandra with the expression of a man deciding whether to say something else, and something in her face must have communicated that this would be a significant error in judgment, because he didn't. He walked out the door. A car engine started outside. The three of them that remained, Cole, Cassandra, Victor, sat in the silence he left behind. Victor looked at Cole for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he said, "You'd have done it. Physically removed him." "No," Cole said. He straightened. But he didn't know that. Something moved across Victor's face. It might have been, if Cassandra was reading it correctly, reluctant amusement. He stood slowly. He looked at his daughter. "The board vote is withdrawn," he said. "Effective today. I'll have Deborah notified." Cassandra looked at him. "Why?" Victor picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He looked around the kitchen again, but differently. This time not with assessment, with something more careful, as if he were seeing it instead of measuring it. "Because," he said quietly, "you are stronger than I have given you credit for, and I have understood that for some time. I simply have not—" He stopped, adjusted the collar of his jacket. The unfinished sentence sat in the air between them. "I'll call you," he said. "When you're ready." He walked out. The front door closed. Outside, the second car started. The sound moved down the gravel road and faded until there was nothing but the farm again. Cassandra sat at the table and didn't say anything for a full minute, and Cole didn't rush her. Finally she said, "You didn't have to do that." He was out of line. He was, but I had it. I know you had it. Cole came around the table and sat down across from her in the chair her father had vacated. But sometimes someone says something like that, and you don't have to have it alone. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. She said it simply without qualification or deflection, which was not something that came naturally to her and which she was actively practicing. Cole nodded. "You're welcome." They sat for another quiet moment. "He might actually call," she said. "My father. When he says he'll call, sometimes he means it. Would that be a good thing?" She thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet, but it would be a new thing. That's something." Noah came down from his room 20 minutes later, moving with the careful casualness of a child who has been listening from the hallway and wants very much not to reveal this. "Are the black cars gone?" he asked. "They're gone," Cole said. Noah came fully into the kitchen and looked at Cassandra with a seriousness that was entirely his mother's. She imagined Cole had said once that the boy had her eyes and her way of cutting straight to the center of a thing. "Were those bad people?" Noah asked. Cassandra considered how to answer that. "One of them was a man who said something unkind," she said. "And one of them was my father, who is complicated." "What does complicated mean?" It means he loves me in ways that are hard to see sometimes, and he hurts me in ways that I don't think he fully understands. She looked at Noah steadily. Some people are like that. You can love someone and still have to tell them clearly what you will and won't accept from them. Noah processed this with the thoroughness he applied to everything. Did you tell him? I did. Did he listen? He listened more than I expected. Noah seemed to find this satisfactory. He climbed into the chair beside her and pulled his dinosaur book from somewhere she hadn't seen him retrieve it and opened it to a page he had flagged. I found a new fact, he said. Do you want to hear it? She looked at this boy, this generous, straightforward, grass-stained, dinosaur-loving boy who had never once since the day she arrived looked at her chair and then looked away. Yes, she said. Tell me. That night was the first night she cried on the farm. She didn't plan it. She had gone to her room after dinner and was sitting by the window, and she was thinking about Ashford's face when he said, "A woman in your condition." And she was thinking about all the faces before his. The interviews, where she could see interviewers deciding how much of her accomplishment to attribute to her disability rather than to her intelligence. The board meetings where she felt she had to be 3 times as prepared as anyone else in the room. The physical therapy sessions she attended at 6 in the morning before work, so no one in her professional circle would know she still needed them. The exhaustion of performing strength so completely and for so long that she had sometimes genuinely confused the performance for the real thing. And underneath all of that, older and quieter, her father's voice. You are not as strong as you believe you are. She sat with all of it in the dark room, and for the first time in years, she didn't try to organize it into something manageable. She just let it be what it was. She cried for a while, not dramatically, just steadily, the way the people who have held something back for too long cry when they finally stop holding. There was a soft knock at the door. She almost said she was fine. The word was already forming the reflex so deep it was nearly automatic. Yeah, she said instead. Cole opened the door a few inches. He had clearly been heading to bed, flannel shirt hair slightly disordered. He looked at her without flinching at what he saw, which was exactly what she needed. Saw the light under the door, he said. You okay, Kay? She considered telling him she was fine. She considered the practiced version of herself that would have handled this moment by now, smoothed it over, sent him back to bed with something reassuring and self-contained. No, she said. Not completely. He pushed the door open a little more. You want company or space? She thought about it. Company, she said. But not, I don't want to talk about it. Not right now. Okay. He came in and pulled the small chair from the desk to the window and sat in it without ceremony, and they sat together in the dark quiet of the Montana night and didn't talk, and it was the most cared for she had felt in longer than she could measure. After a while, he said very quietly, Sarah, my wife. She used to say that grief isn't something you finish, it's something you learn to carry differently. Cassandra didn't answer right away. What are you carrying? She asked eventually. Tonight, gratitude mostly. He looked at her. And something I'm not sure what to do with yet. She looked back at him. In the dark, with the defenses down and the professional armor somewhere else entirely, she was aware of him with a completeness that was both frightening and deeply quietly right. Neither am I, she said. He reached over and put his hand over hers on the arm of the chair. Not grasping it, just placing it there, warm and steady, an offering of presence. She turned her hand over and held it. They sat like that for a long time, while the farm settled around them, and Noah slept down the hall, and the Montana sky did what it always did, vast and indifferent and extraordinary outside the window. She didn't try to name what it was. She didn't calculate where it was going, or what it meant for New York, or the company, or the next 60 days of legal maneuvering, or any of the dozen urgent things that had defined her life for years. She just held his hand in the dark and let herself be where she was. And where she was, she realized slowly, was somewhere she had not been in a very long time. Home. not in the sense of a place she had lived before. In the sense of a place where she was known, not her title, not her chair, not her father's name, not her carefully managed public narrative. Just her. And that was enough. She was beginning to understand everything. She woke the next morning feeling lighter than she had in years, which surprised her, because nothing had technically been resolved. The company was still in a complicated position. Her father was still her father. She was still 3 months into a life she hadn't chosen and wasn't sure how to return from. But she had held someone's hand in the dark and cried without apologizing for it. And she had survived both things completely intact. More than intact. Cole was already in the greenhouse when she got there at 7:30. Noah had been deposited at the school bus stop, and the farm had that particular morning quality. It got after he left, quieter, steadier, like a breath held, and then released. She came through the door, and Cole looked up and said, "Good morning," the way he said everything without performance. And she said good morning back, and they went to work. That was how it was between them now. No dramatic declarations. No careful navigation of what had happened the night before. Just two people who had told each other something true and were now continuing to exist in the same space, which was she was discovering its own kind of intimacy. "I want to expand the CSA program," she said about an hour in while she was reviewing the subscriber numbers. "We have 63 households now. I think we can get to 120 by spring. That's double." "I know. We'd need more growing capacity. I've been looking at the East Field. You haven't rotated anything into it yet this season. If we prep it in the next 3 weeks, we can get a winter crop started: kale chard, Brussels sprouts. They'll carry the spring boxes without straining your current rotation." Cole set down the tray he was holding and looked at her with an expression she had started to be able to read. It was the expression he got when she said something that was both correct and slightly ahead of where he had expected the conversation to go. "You've been thinking about this farm a lot," he said. "I think about most things a lot. It's a problem I'm working on." "The thinking too much, or the farm specifically?" She looked up from the laptop. "Both," she said honestly. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up the tray again. "Show me the East Field numbers after lunch." She did. He looked at them for a long time, making the small sounds he made when he was genuinely processing something, not performing consideration, but actually thinking. Then he said, "Let's do it." And that was that. She called Priya that afternoon from the porch. "The board vote is withdrawn," Cassandra said. A beat of silence. Then, "How?" "My father came in person. We had a conversation. He left." Just like that. Not exactly just like that. There were some complications in the middle. What kind of complications? Ashford said something offensive. Cole asked him to leave. Another beat. Cole asked Daniel Ashford to leave a room. His room. Cole's house. Yes. And Ashford left. He did. Cassandra. Priya's voice had taken on a quality she recognized, the particular warmth that Priya deployed when she was about to say something important and wanted it to land carefully. "How are you doing?" Not the company. Not your father. You. She looked out at the fields. The afternoon light was doing that thing it did in Montana that she had never seen anywhere else, turning everything gold and specific, making each individual stalk and fence post and tree line look like it had been painted there on purpose. "I think I'm good," she said. "I think I might actually be good." The man, she confirmed. "Are you going to tell me?" "Not yet. She searched for the word. "It's real, which means I don't want to talk it into something else before I understand it myself." Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what you sound like." "What?" "You sound like yourself. The version of you from before the company got so big that you forgot you were a person inside it." Cassandra sat with that for a moment. It moved through her like something that had been looking for a place to land for a long time. "I have some ideas," Cassandra said, "about the company, about what I actually want it to be. I want to talk to you about them when I'm back. When are you back? She hesitated. I don't know yet. Priya was smiling. She could hear it. Okay, Priya said. I'll be here. The call she had not expected came 2 weeks later. Victor called on a Sunday morning. She was in the kitchen making coffee when the phone rang, and she looked at his name on the screen and felt the familiar complicated weight of it. The love and the history and the damage, all of it bound together, the way it always was when the person who hurt you is also the person who made you. She answered. I've been thinking, Victor said. He sounded different. She couldn't immediately identify what was different, and then she realized he sounded tired. Not strategically tired, not performatively weary. Actually tired in the way of a man who has been awake at 3 a.m. for reasons he hasn't admitted to anyone. About what? She asked. About your mother. She went still. Her mother had died when Cassandra was 11. Breast cancer, swift and total, the kind that doesn't negotiate. It was not a subject Victor Sterling discussed. In 23 years, she could count on one hand the number of times he had mentioned her name. She would have come here, he said, to this farm if she were in your position. She always believed that moving toward the difficult thing was better than moving away from it. A pause. I sent you there to correct you. She would have seen it differently. Cassandra held the phone very carefully. She would have said I was sending you somewhere you might grow, he said. And I think looking at what I've heard, what I saw when I was there, that she would have been right. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was aware of the immense cost of what he was saying, not because it was dramatic, but because Victor Sterling did not do this. He did not revise. He did not circle back. He did not say, I may have been wrong in any form, direct or indirect. Dad, she said. Her voice was careful. Why are you telling me this? A long silence. Because, he said finally, I have spent a great deal of my life making decisions that were correct and costly. And I am old enough now to understand the difference between those two things. Another pause. I don't expect you to. I'm not asking for anything. I simply wanted to say it. She breathed. Thank you, she said. Simply. The way she had learned to accept things without immediately building a wall around them. He cleared his throat. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to something closer to his usual register. Still her father, still Victor Sterling, but with something underneath it that wasn't usually audible. The Whitaker farm, he said. The work you've been doing there, I've looked at it. Your CSA expansion model is sound. She almost laughed. You looked at it. I had someone pull the public filings. Force of habit. A brief pause that might have contained the ghost of humor. You're underpricing the premium boxes. I know. We're raising them next quarter. Good. He paused. Call me when you're back. I will. And Cassandra. His voice softened slightly, or as much as it ever did. The accident. The wheelchair. I have never said to you directly that I am sorry for the ways I have handled that, poorly, over many years. The words came out with the particular difficulty of something that has been prepared and is still hard to deliver. You are not a liability. You have never been a liability. I understood that and I failed to say it, and I should have said it a long time ago. The kitchen was very quiet. Yes, she said. You should have. She didn't soften it. She didn't add, but it's okay, or I understand, or any of the reflexive grace notes she might have offered in the past. She let it stand as what it was true, and not yet fully resolved, and hers to hold at her own pace. Victor accepted this without protest. They said goodbye. She put the phone on the counter and sat in the kitchen for a few minutes in the way that she had learned to do with large things. Not processing them immediately, just letting them exist. She told Cole that night on the porch in the dark with the coffee between them and the Montana sky doing its impossible thing overhead. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, How do you feel? Like something shifted, not fixed, just shifted. She wrapped both hands around her mug. He said she would have been right. My mother. That's the first time in 23 years he's spoken about her like she was a real person whose opinions still mattered. What was she like? Cassandra thought about it carefully, the way you think about things that are precious and slightly fragile. Practical, she said. Funny in a quiet way. She used to make terrible puns and then look completely innocent when my father groaned. She smiled without meaning to. She was the only person I ever saw make him laugh at himself. Actually laugh. She paused. She died before the accident, before the wheelchair. Sometimes I wonder what she would have said about all of it. What do you think she would have said? Cassandra looked at the dark fields. I think she would have told me to stop performing and start living. She glanced at Cole. Which is what everyone has been telling me in different ways for about 3 years and which I have been professionally ignoring. You weren't ready. No. Are you now? She looked at him directly. I think I've been getting ready here. Without realizing, that's what was happening. He nodded slowly. He looked at his coffee. Then he looked at her, and she recognized the expression she had seen it in the greenhouse and in the kitchen and in the dark of her room that night, and it was the expression of a man who had decided something and was being careful about how he moved toward it. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. When your father called me about hosting you before you arrived, I almost said no. He turned his mug in his hands. Noah was in a rough patch at school. The farm was in a difficult stretch. The last thing I needed was a stranger in the house especially. He stopped, chose his words. Especially someone I'd been told was difficult. You were told I was difficult. Your father's exact words were, my daughter requires a structured environment and firm handling. She stared at him. He said firm handling. He did. About me. About you. She sat back. I don't know whether to be furious or grateful he chose you. Both probably. The corner of Cole's mouth moved. My point is, I said yes because I needed the money. That's the honest truth. And then you got out of that car, and the first thing you said was that you'd been sent here as punishment, and you said it like you were daring me to pity you. And I thought... He paused. I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. Interesting, she repeated. And then you spent 3 hours with my operational files and told me I was losing $40,000 a year, and I thought, okay, this person is something else entirely. She was quiet. Cole, she said. Yeah, I don't want to go back to New York, not to stay, not to what it was. She said it out loud for the first time, and the truth of it was so complete that it almost took her breath away. I want to restructure what the company is. I want to run it differently. From here partly, with real purpose behind it instead of just growth for growth's sake. She looked at him. I've been thinking about a program. For disabled workers, for veterans, for people who get told they don't fit the standard structure. Agricultural training, business mentorship, real employment. Using this farm as one of the anchors. Cole looked at her for a long moment. You want to build something here, he said. I want to build something with you, she said. If that's... She stopped, held his gaze. If that's something you want. He leaned forward, set his mug on the porch rail, and looked at her with the full, unhurried attention that was simply how he existed in the world. I have been, he said slowly, trying to figure out how to ask you not to leave, for about 3 weeks. She exhaled. Noah, he added, has been operating under the assumption that you're staying since approximately day 4. I thought you should know. She laughed, a full one, real and unguarded. He never said anything. He figured it was obvious. It apparently was to everyone except me. Cole reached over and put his hand over hers the way he had that night in her room, and this time she turned her hand immediately without hesitation. Stay, he said, simply. I'm staying, she said. 6 months later, the farm hosted its first program cohort, 12 participants. Veterans, disabled adults. Individuals who had been told in various ways, by various systems, that they were too complicated, too limited, too much trouble to accommodate. They arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Cassandra was at the entrance to greet them, and she watched their faces when they saw the accessible pathways, the modified workstations, the greenhouse rows adapted for different physical needs, and she watched the particular expression move across each of them, the one she recognized from her own first weeks here. The slow, cautious realization that a space had been designed with them in mind, rather than in spite of them. She stood in front of them that first morning, sat technically in her chair at the front of the greenhouse, and she told them the truth. Not the polished version, not the keynote version, the real one. She told them about the boardroom, about being sent here as punishment, about the $40,000 loss she found in a spreadsheet, and the tomato plants that needed staking, and the 7-year-old who had never once looked at her wheelchair with anything other than matter-of-fact curiosity. She told them about crying in the dark and holding a hand and deciding slowly and imperfectly and without a clear plan to stop surviving her life and start living it. She told them that the farm had not fixed her, that nothing fixes you, that the point is not to arrive somewhere repaired and complete, but to find the places and people that make the work of being yourself feel worth doing. They listened, really listened the way people listen when they recognize their own story in someone else's words. In the back of the greenhouse, Cole stood with Noah beside him, Noah's hand in his, and he watched her speak, and his expression was the same one he had been wearing for 6 months. The one that said simply and completely, "I see you, all of you, and there is nothing there I would change." After the session, Noah pulled away from his father and ran to her through the greenhouse aisle, weaving between participants with the total physical confidence of a child who knows exactly where he's going. "You were good," he announced, arriving at her chair. "Thank you. You talked about me, the part about the 7-year-old. "I did. I'm 8 now," he said with dignity. "You are. I'll update my material." He beamed. Then he leaned in and said in a stage whisper that was audible to everyone within 10 feet. "Dad cried a little during the part about the wheelchair. He'll say he didn't, but he did. I saw." Cole from the back of the room said Noah. Noah looked entirely unrepentant. Cassandra reached out and pulled him into a hug, one of the easy, natural ones they had developed over months of homework sessions and Sunday pancakes and dinosaur facts delivered at breakfast, and she held him for a moment and looked over his head at Cole. He was smiling, steady and real, and entirely his. She smiled back. On the day they married, a Saturday in October, the farm dressed in autumn and full of people who had built something together. Cassandra rolled down the aisle they had laid through the east field, the one she had proposed, expanding the one that was now productive and beautiful and entirely theirs. Noah walked beside her. His choice. He had announced it 4 months earlier as a fact that required no discussion. "I'm walking with Cassandra. That's what I'm doing." And so he did. 8 years old in a button-down shirt, serious and proud, holding her hand as they moved toward Cole, who stood at the end of the aisle looking at her the way he always looked at her, like she was a person he had been given the extraordinary good fortune of knowing, and like he intended to keep knowing her for as long as possible. When she reached him, he didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her and she looked at him, and between them was everything. The gravel driveway, and the spreadsheets, and the porch nights, and the hand in the dark, and the east field, and the program participants, and Noah's dinosaur facts, and the moment she had looked at this man and said, "That's not all you are," all of it present in the small private moment before the words began. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. Noah between them looked up at both of them and sighed with theatrical patience. "Can we start?" he said. "I've been standing here forever." Laughter moved through the guests. Cole laughed. Cassandra laughed. And in that laughter, warm and unscripted and entirely real, the ceremony began. Her father was there, seated in the 3rd row, silver-haired and upright, watching his daughter with an expression that had taken most of a year to find its way onto his face. It was not simple. It was not complete. There was still distance in it and history and the complicated geometry of a relationship that would always require work. But he was there. And when she caught his eye for a moment as she passed, he nodded just once, small and genuine, and she nodded back. It was enough. It was for now exactly enough. Later, when the music started and the field filled with movement, and Noah had located 3 other children to run with between the pumpkin rows, Cassandra sat beside Cole at the edge of the gathering and looked at everything she had built and been given and chosen and grown into, and she thought about the woman who had sat in the back of a black SUV on a gravel road, furious and frightened, and absolutely certain that she was being diminished. That woman had been wrong, not about everything, not about her father, not about her value, not about the fight she was right to keep fighting, but wrong about this place. Wrong about what a punishment could become when you stopped running from it and started paying attention. Wrong most profoundly about herself, about the dimensions of what she was capable of, not in the boardroom, not on the quarterly report, but here in the actual dailiness of a life chosen freely and lived without armor. She had arrived believing she was being sent away because she was broken. She left the woman she had always underneath, everything been capable of becoming. And the farm, the gravel roads, the greenhouse, the east field, the porch in the dark, the boy who knew everything about dinosaurs, the man who had looked at her from the first moment like she was simply and entirely a person. The farm had not fixed her. It had simply refused to let her pretend she needed fixing. And that, in the end, had made all the difference.